evening, everybody. I'm Thom Shulok, as Paul mentioned, and tonight I'm going to talk about Java licensing and the importance of LTS, which is long-term support. Now, I realize it's almost 8 o'clock, it's the end of the day, we just had a lot of pizza, and probably one of the least exciting things to talk about is Java licensing or any kind of licensing. So I'll try to make this as interesting as possible. There are some interesting things that I discovered along the way as well. So let's get started. So a little bit more about me. Paul gave a little bio. But first and foremost, I'm not a lawyer. I'm going to be talking about legal things, licenses. Do not construe any of this as legal advice. As it says, even the best software developer is still the worst lawyer. And before you ask, no, I'm not the best software developer either. As Paul mentioned, we first met in 1988 at General Dynamics, and ironically, not far from this spot. This used to be the General Dynamics plant. And since Java didn't exist back then, we actually used Smalltalk, which is one of the forerunners of a lot of the things you see in Java. We even shared a cube together, and we had Solaris workstations on our desktops. So I was at General Dynamics for about 2.5 years, and I was out of grad school, and after 2.5 years of working for a defense contractor, and the bureaucracy and the slowness and everything else, I swore I would never, ever, ever work for a defense contractor again. And Paul, it had nothing to do with you.
I was going to say, how long did that last?
Yeah, so there was a succession of companies. I worked for some startups. I worked for some small companies, including my own startup. I did some consulting. And as you might guess, I've been working at Lockheed Martin for the past 14 years. If you're not familiar with Lockheed Martin, they are the world's largest defense contractor. So never say never.
Didn't they buy?
Yeah, it's not my fault. I didn't go there necessarily willingly. They actually bought the tiny bankrupt startup I was working for. And at the time I had a mortgage, so it sounded like a good idea, and I've been there ever since. And just a reminder, I'm not a lawyer. Okay, so what's this all about? What's the problem here? This year there have been a lot of changes with Java licensing. There's a lot coming in January 2019, and there's a lot of FUD about Java licensing and the future of Java. Is it really free? Is it really open source? If you're not familiar with the term FUD, it stands for fear, uncertainty, and doubt. So ambiguity. There's a lot of ambiguity in both the licenses, but also about what's really going on. And so ambiguity tends to lead to uncertainty. And if you're uncertain, uncertainty tends to lead to doubt that you're doing the right thing. And fear comes from the fact that if you're doing the wrong thing, you're probably going to get punished potentially severely, either yourself or the company you work for. So what I'd like to do tonight is dive in a little more in depth with Java licensing, what's going on, what it means, in the hopes that learning more will reduce our uncertainty, our doubt, and our fear. Most of the time, the more you learn, the less fear you have. Sometimes ignorance is bliss, though. The biggest takeaway from tonight is now is the time to be thinking about what's your plan for Java. If you're using Java to develop commercial applications, you need to be thinking and deciding right now about what's your plan going forward. If you've used Java just at home, just to play with and as a hobbyist, then it's really not a problem. What I'm really focusing on tonight is using Java in a commercial context. When you are shipping applications that use Java, what are the implications now? When you ship an application to a customer and you've got a long-term commitment to that customer, you're supporting them for 5, 10, 15 years. Right now, I'm in the middle of a proposal that has a 30-year arc behind it, from development through test, acceptance, warranty, and maintenance. And so we have to think long term. And of course, everyone this year was shocked to discover, what do you mean Java's not free? And so there's been a lot of discussion going on at my workplace about, well, what's the strategy here? What's the plan forward? How do we deal with this in an economically effective way? And there are a whole bunch of different possibilities. And so if you don't believe me that this is an area of interest, you can just ask Google. 2 of the top 5 questions. One is Java open source? Another, is Java free? A lot of people have these questions. A lot of people are wondering what's happening, what's going on, and what does it mean. And I won't point out that is Java dying or is Java dead down the bottom there. Okay, so let's go back to the beginning. How did we get here? In the beginning, there was Sun. Sun was predominantly a hardware company. They made and sold workstations. They sold hardware. They generally gave away software as a way to help them sell more hardware. They didn't give it completely away, and I'll get to that in a second. The initial license was actually a proprietary license from Sun, but you could use Java for free, provided you weren't using it in an embedded context. So we're all mostly software engineers or engineers here. When I say embedded, that means something to us. That's a very concrete term, and I'll give you an example. One of those tiny startups I worked for built sensor networks. And one of the sensors was basically a tripod with a box on the top of it. Inside the box was a single board computer. It ran a version of Unix. And when you booted up, it immediately kicked off the Java application that was running that would then connect to the sensors and start bringing in the data. This is an embedded system. You can't change the behavior of this system without cracking open the box and hacking away at stuff. And this is in contrast to general purpose computing. Remember that phrase, I'm going to come back to it later. But if you were doing embedded development with Java, you had to pay for it, unless you found an alternative, like we did, with IBM. They had the J9 Java VM, which could be used for embedded purposes with no licensing fees. And since we're a startup, we didn't have any money, we couldn't pay people licensing fees anyway. Subsequent to this initial proprietary license, Java was open sourced by Sun, but not completely open source. There were parts to Java they didn't actually have the rights to open source. And so this is where the problems start. The water's muddy to begin with, and it only gets muddier from here. Over time, those components have been brought into the open source world, but it's been a long road to get there. After all that, Oracle bought Sun. So you see Scott McNeely and Larry Ellison here, almost smiling about the merger of the two companies. And once that happened, things changed. And so this is the first of our fun facts. Oracle didn't buy Sun just to sue Google. A lot of the stuff Oracle built, a lot of the software Oracle creates is dependent on the Java ecosystem. And they were concerned what would happen if somebody else bought Sun, like IBM. And so this was a move by Larry Ellison to sort of take the future into his own hands and actually buy Java so Oracle, one of the key pillars behind Oracle, would be safe. And then they sued Google. So suing Google is fun, but consider, unlike Sun, Oracle is a software company. They make money by selling software. And so once you realize that, you can see it was only a matter of time before things were going to start changing. And the first big change was the BCL, the Binary Code License Agreement. So this was the first big change once Oracle took over. The BCL was included with the versions of Java they started shipping. So developers may only use certain features of Java SE for free. This isn't so bad. The commercial features are pretty well articulated. You can look and see what the commercial features are and what the other features are. You even have to explicitly enable those commercial features. They are downloaded when you download Java, but you have to explicitly enable them so you know what you're doing. If you enable them, you're using the commercial features. Now, those free features are only free if used for certain limited purposes. And this is where we get to general purpose computing. So general purpose computing is not necessarily the clean inverse of not embedded computing. And this is where the problems really start. Even at my own company, I was arguing with my legal staff about what this meant. As I mentioned before, I'm not even a lawyer. And so there's confusion, both with lawyers, with technical people, with leadership, as to what does general purpose computing actually mean. So, in the license agreement, I'll just read this. It says, for general computing functions under end user control, such as, but not specifically limited to, email, general purpose internet browsing, and Office Suite productivity tools. So, interesting, but the phrase that sticks out here is, however, systems and solutions that provide dedicated functionality or use embedded or function-specific software applications, and they list some examples in there, are excluded from the definition. So the interesting twist here is there's dedicated functionality or embedded. So when they say dedicated functionality, they're not necessarily talking about those nicely defined embedded systems we first talked about, where it's all it does is one thing and it's using Java to do that one thing. So an example, let's say you write a Java-based point of sale system. Runs on a PC. This is a general purpose computer. However, Oracle may look at that and decide, well, actually, even though you can do other stuff on it, that's not really the way you're using it. This is dedicated you've created dedicated functionality for this computing device. And you could argue and say, well, no, it's a general purpose computer. And they say, no, you owe us a fair amount of money for what you've been doing. This is actually what's happened. But from a lawyer's perspective, and this is from Bloomberg Law, their assessment of what general purpose computing means, they say these terms are remarkably vague. And the problem with such vague and ambiguous definitions is compounded by the realities of modern day computing, where the limits of general purpose or mobile or embedded are not easily determined. The lines are blurry. What's your cell phone? Is that a general purpose computer? Is it an embedded computer? There was a time where Sun decided a phone was an embedded computer, and you had to pay to use Java on a phone. The other problem is there's very little guidance from the court system. None of this stuff has ever gone to trial. So there hasn't been a jury or a judge who's weighed in and said, this is what it means. And again, we're back to that ambiguity or uncertainty about what's this license agreement really mean and what do I have to do to comply with it. So fun fact number 2, in most jurisdictions, ambiguous contracts are said to be resolved against the party who drafted the contract. The party that did not write the contract tends to get the benefit of the doubt. So the question here is, do you feel lucky? So the law is sort of on your side here, but if you're being sued for $100,000, how confident do you feel about that? And as an aside, this is also why there are no one-page contracts or EULAs, because the person writing the contract is thinking about absolutely everything they can to put into that contract. And that's why you've got this 40-page contract you've got to read through, understand, and sign. Because the drafter of the contract recognizes the liability is on them to think of everything. Okay, so then comes LMS, License Management Services. So Oracle License Management Services basically audit the users of Oracle technology, Oracle databases, Java, all the stuff Oracle makes. In the case of Java, they're focused on those two things. Are you using the commercial features of Java without paying for them? Or are you doing things that are not considered by someone as general purpose computing? And one customer with 80,000 PCs was informed by Oracle that they were actually in breach of their Java SE agreement because they were not doing general purpose computing with the Java technology they had. Another customer, they told him they owed him $100,000. The customer said no, and they argued about it. And in the end, they settled for $30,000. There was one licensee who actually filed a court case and said, forget this, I'm taking this to court. Before it could get to court, it was settled out of court, of course, confidentially. So nobody knows what the deal really is, and nobody really wants to have LMS come to their business and say, hi, we're from Oracle, we want to help you. Okay, so now we're up to 2018, and then this happened. So this is the announcement from Oracle this year that as of 2020, Java 8 will be supported for personal, individual use. Public updates for Java 8 released after January 2019, next month, will not be available for business, commercial, or production use without a commercial license. And so this is the warning bell right here. If your livelihood depends on shipping Java applications, or if you're on the hook for supporting Java deployments, that are out in the field, out at the customer site. The last bullet is actually from Oracle itself, saying if you are acting on behalf of an enterprise, Oracle recommends you review the roadmap information for the Java SE 8 and beyond and begin to assess your ongoing Java support requirements in order to migrate to a later release or obtain a Java SE subscription as appropriate on a timely basis. This is the roadmap. And so I've highlighted all the asterisks, little daggers, carrots for the footnotes that come with this roadmap. And I won't go into all of them, but one of them, suffice it to say, basically says, oh, these dates, yeah, maybe they're real, maybe they're not. You should call us. We'd like to talk to you. And so as someone who's dependent on Java and looking at this roadmap, they could be forgiven to think, well, this is what it looks like down the road. So a cleaner version of a lot of what was announced this year. So two things should jump out right away, Java 8 and Java 11. These are the versions of Java that Oracle has committed to long-term support. You still have to pay for it, but it's still important to recognize that going forward, 8 and 11 are the major releases that are going to be supported not just by Oracle, but by the broader community. So if you're behind Java 8, now's a good time to get onto Java 8. And full disclosure, I'm on Java 7 right now, but in 2019, we will be on Java 8. And we're behind because we built a framework that other people who have Java applications use. And as soon as you advance a version, you get phone calls saying, why did you move? I have a Java 6 application. Why did you do that? And so we tend to be a little bit further behind. For most people, Java 11 is probably what you want to target in terms of if you need long-term support. Because the other thing to notice here are these green stair steps. Green stair steps for the OpenJDK releases. This is the new release cadence. Every 6 months, a new major release of Java. So granted, the duration is shorter, so they're not the ginormous releases you would normally get with Java. But again, they are major feature releases. And so they will stop maintaining a release when they make the next major release. And you might be thinking, well, what's the big deal? It's on the next release, let's go. This is where we get into long-term support, maintenance, customer deployments that you don't want to just go in and drop a new major version on them and see what happens. You really are stuck because it's not viable to do those kinds of updates for deployed systems. Internal systems, sure, again, depending on how they're used. But this is the one that really stood out to me when I finally started wading through all this to understand what's the future landscape really look like? Because yeah, we're thinking at my company 2030, 2040, where's this all going to go? And so there's even Java 17, because after this, that's the next one. But that's not for a few years yet. But just remember Java 8, Java 11, and Java 17. That's the stuff you keep in the back of your mind as we roll forward with all this. So let's talk a little about long-term support and deployed systems. As I mentioned, we deal a lot with client-deployed systems. We're not running a cloud. We generally have on-premises systems because the customer doesn't want to connect their stuff to anything else. So there's a lot of on-site stuff. The first rule of maintaining a deployed system is do not touch anything that you don't have to, because you will introduce other problems, and other problems make your customer very unhappy. The things you care about are security patches, which are a real thing, which we'll talk about in a second. Necessary bug fixes. Bug fixes are always coming out. Some may matter to your deployment and to your customer, some may not. Too many screens to look at. And going back to that zero overlap of the OpenJDK cadence, it's really a problem here because, again, you're trying to perturb the deployed system as little as possible. And it's very difficult to do that when you're just going from major release to major release to major release. You lose the benefit of those incremental updates that have the essentials, like the security updates and the major bug fixes. So here we are. It's always one of these pick two things. So there's stability, there's security, and there's free. And it sort of falls out like this. So if you want stability and you want free from Oracle, you could just stay on JDK 8U192 forever. That is the last free version that could be used for commercial use. This has some problems, which we'll get to in a second. If you want stable and secure and you don't mind paying for it, Oracle will happily sell you a subscription. We'll talk about the cost of that in a second as well. Finally, if you want secure, because it has the secure updates, and you want free, there's a variety of OpenJDK options. However, there's the stability issue, because you now have that release cadence where it's changing substantially every 6 months. Okay, so how bad is it? When we talk about security updates, do we really care? Is it really that important? So here are the critical patch updates for Java. Tends to be 4 updates every year. They tend to release them quarterly. And so I just picked the most recent one, October 2018. This is a risk matrix. This shows you every security vulnerability that they have patched in this critical patch release. And there's all kinds of stuff in terms of remote exploits, privileges, yeah, no privilege attacks where you don't need any privileges at all. So you can do a remote exploit with no privileges. Again, these are actually real. And the problem is when they release this risk matrix, everybody gets to see the risk matrix. So they know, oh, if you're not on this version, you have these vulnerabilities. So I know exactly how to attack your system. These become more and more important every day. As the world gets more connected, systems become more exposed. So if your system runs in a giant safe that no one connects to, you're probably okay. But everything's connected to everything else. People interact with these systems as well. So maintaining a high security profile, especially on behalf of your customer, is a very important aspect of maintaining a system. So that's security. Okay, how about bug fixes? So in minor version 192, these are all the bug fixes. And I realize it's tiny, but I wanted to squeeze it on there. There's about 40 of them. And so without cherry picking, I grabbed the top 4. And so what the top 4 are, the first one is a memory leak, which could be a problem depending on how you're using it. Second one, which I found really interesting, was Java apps fail to start when some minimal fonts are present. So the app won't even start at all, just because of a font issue. The next one, shift or caps lock not working in text field after accented keystrokes. So maybe you don't care because you don't have any accents in the thing. If you have international customers, they're going to hit this one. And you need to fix it because it's really annoying. Just like the next one, scroll position in scroll pane is reset after calling validate. Doesn't sound like a big deal, but if you're updating that behind the scenes and the person has a big table or whatever, and they've scrolled down to the middle where the thing is they want to work on, and you throw a validate at it, it goes back to the top. Again, poor user experience. The thing that amazed me here is this is 192. I mean, Java 8's been out forever, and I figured at this point they're just fixing little stupid things that people have complained about for 6 years, and they finally got around to it. These are still real issues, even in what is really one of the most mature versions of Java out there that's still being actively used. And so the security issues, the bug fix issues, those are real. And if you have customers, you need to be taking care of those. So if you accept that, you need to deal with the security issues, you need to deal with bug fixes. It brings us to the next logical question, which is, okay, fine. What will this cost? Well, let's find out. So Oracle. If you go to Oracle for your Java support, CPU-based licensing, $25. Doesn't sound bad. Oops. However, it's per month and it's per processor. And if you notice, there's also an asterisk on CPU-based, which I'll get to in just a second. User-based, $2.50. Of course, per month, per user. So this is money you're paying forever. This is a subscription. This is not a one-time thing. You pay it every month or every year, depending on how you choose to do it. But volume discounts are available. So the first asterisk. CPU-based really means core-based. So the cores in your CPU, there's something called a core factor. And once you sit down with Oracle and talk about licensing, they'll say, well, how many cores do your CPUs have? They consider the core to be the processor. And so it's going to cost you even more than you first thought. Per user, the double asterisk, if you want to talk about virtualized environments and running Java in a virtualized environment, it's a whole separate can of beans. It gets very complicated, and if you thought general purpose computing was vague and ill-defined, you should explore virtualization and how you pay for it with an Oracle license. Fun fact number 3, Oracle and Google don't get along, in part because of Java licensing. And then there's also the issue of the $8.8 billion lawsuit, Oracle suing Google, that will likely go before the Supreme Court in 2019. Okay, so after all this, you've got to be thinking there have to be other options. What else can we do if we don't want to pay Oracle and we still want to deal with security and still want to deal with bug fixes and make our application the best it can be without spending a fortune in subscription fees? So first out of the box, like I said, you could be on Java 8 U192 forever. It's free. It's also wildly insecure. If you notice that security slide, all the things they just fixed in 192, you can imagine what they're going to fix in the next release of Java 8. So it's really not a viable position going forward from a security perspective, but also from a bug fix perspective. Okay? You could use Oracle's non-commercial distribution for commercial use. I'm just putting this in for completeness. Under no circumstances should you ever do this. This is the most obvious and flagrant violation of the license, and no judge is going to look at you and say, you didn't know what you were doing? Really? Okay, you could rely on Linux OS updates to the OpenJDK. So this is a good possibility if you're using Red Hat. Red Hat is a very active supporter of the OpenJDK community. If you're already paying for Red Hat, you kind of get this for free. So you can get the Linux updates to the OpenJDK pretty promptly. And this is where you start to see the distinction. There are some free options and there are pay options. And what the difference really is here, if you really need a timely response to a security problem or a bug fix, you're probably going to have to pay for it. If you're using the free options, you sort of get it when you get it. And so this is one of those things you've got to think about with your deployments and with your application. Just how important are those updates and how quickly do I have to get them? How security sensitive are my customers? Will they accept it by saying, yeah, we'll get that fixed in 6 months, that exploit you're reading about in the newspapers and how it's affecting everyone? That may not fly with a customer. You could also pay someone else for OpenJDK support. There are options here. There's Azul, there's IBM, there are others as well. Again, all are subscription-based. So this is a recurring cost you're going to have to maintain your Java environment, your Java foundation. Some of these, Azul is one good example, offers Zulu. Zulu is a free version. So you can get support for free with Zulu. But again, it's that timeliness question because they're really under no obligation to get you fixes quickly unless you're going to pay them. So one strategy is you start with Zulu and you get it for free until you hit that first really big problem. Then you flip over to the subscription model and say, hi, I'm a subscriber, please fix this problem quickly. You could use Adopt OpenJDK. So this is relatively new, it's still coming together, but kind of think of it as a much larger community edition. It's not just one company, it's a whole consortium of companies and individuals working to move the OpenJDK forward. So it's a good possibility, but still a little early in its formation to really jump on it just yet. You could update your production installations whenever a new major OpenJDK release comes out. Again, this gets back to the stability question. So if you've got the ability to just test the crap out of it before you deploy, it is a possibility. You can just stay with the OpenJDK cadence. You update your fielded systems every 6 months or so. There are costs associated with that, obviously, and your customer may not appreciate you coming out every 6 months to say, hi, we're here to update your system again, and you might break something. Finally, you could actually build your own. You can get the source to Java and build it yourself. There's also a Mercurial repository of the latest security patches. You can slipstream those in and just roll it yourself and maintain it yourself. This is potentially a time-consuming process that, again, people may not want to pay for you to be doing this when you should be doing other stuff the company wants you to do. Now, there's been one more interesting development. This was just last month, and part of the reason I'm up here talking about this today is Amazon. Last month, Amazon announced Toretto, which is their version of the OpenJDK. It's a no-cost, multi-platform, production-ready distribution of the OpenJDK. All the words I wanted to hear. It's awesome. So, Toretto comes with long-term support, including performance and security fixes. Gets better. Amazon Toretto is internally run on thousands of production servers at Amazon Web Services. So if you want something that's been tested really well, think of all the servers and all the data centers running all the applications AWS runs, the ones that are running Java anyway. And so this version is getting seriously wrung out. Currently, you can use Toretto for Windows, Mac OS, Amazon Linux 2. Support for the other Linux variants comes in Q1 of 2019. So if you want to use Red Hat, that'll be available in 2019 as well. Version 8 will be supported until June of 2023. Version 11 supported until August of 2024, at least. And presumably by 2024, we've got JDK 17, again, which will be the long-term support version of Java. And once again, it is available at no cost. There are no additional paid features or restrictions, and there's an asterisk, and the asterisk says there's no asterisk. They're pretty straightforward and clear about this. One other interesting thing about Toretto, for me, which makes it quite possibly the top choice right now anyway, unlike Oracle, but like Sun, Amazon isn't really in the business of selling software, apart from the software you can just go to Amazon and buy. They sell services. They sell Amazon Web Services. They sell a lot of Amazon Web Services. What Toretto does is it enables their customers to more effectively use Amazon Web Services. So it's very unlikely Amazon will come back in 2 years and say, hi guys, we're going to start charging for Toretto. It's not really their core business. They want to make it as easy as possible and as FUD-free to use AWS. And by using Toretto, it's one way to capture a large swath of the Java market. You can use Toretto directly on their servers. You can run it locally. You don't even have to use AWS to use Toretto. And so for me, it's the perfect blend of a large company that's not going away, who's not really interested in making money off selling software, who has the infrastructure to really test the software, to test their version of Java. That makes this a really compelling thing to look at. And like I said, this just came out last month. I'm still looking at it, but going into 2019, to me it seems to be the most obvious choice. It blends all the things I need. But again, that's just for my own needs at work. You need, again, to think about what you're doing with Java, how you're using Java, what your support and maintenance responsibilities are with Java, to understand which solution will work best for you. But from everything I've read so far about Toretto, for me, this is probably the way to go. Fun fact number 4. Amazon and Oracle don't really get along either. So Oracle, and by Oracle I mean Larry Ellison, has said Amazon is empowered by their own databases. They use Oracle's superior technology. Amazon promptly responded, Amazon will be done with Oracle databases by 2019. And so the feud continues, and I can only imagine that Amazon Toretto will just throw more fire on the feud as well, because they're probably the likely best choice compared to going to Oracle for support versus using the Toretto distribution, a supported long-term support version, essentially for free. Okay, so some takeaways. If you have long-running deployments, you really do care about long-term support and the implications of what's going on right now in both the commercial Java and the OpenJDK communities. If you care about long-term support, you need to be thinking, am I going to bet on JDK 8 or JDK 11? Either one's fine. It's, again, dictated by what your own requirements are internally as to which JDK you need to use. But 8 and 11 going forward are really the versions you should focus on. And then down the road, version 17 as well. You also need to decide how much support you actually need, and if you want to pay for it. And I have forever in parentheses, because subscription payments drive me nuts. When we're trying to sell a system to a customer who's going to have it forever, they don't want to hear, oh, well, we need to charge you this recurring cost because you're using Java. Or you can buy Java yourself and pay the recurring cost yourself. Because what we're doing is also not considered to be general purpose computing, despite the fact that it runs on a normal computer, a laptop or a workstation. But again, It's not so much anymore, what else can this device do? It's, well, how is the customer using the device most of the time? Again, very vague, not nearly as well defined as the original embedded exclusion, and something you always need to keep in mind when you're dealing with the Oracle-based license. OpenJDK offers a number of different ways out of this. As we saw on the other slide, there are a number of different ways you can get support, paid support, slower and unpaid support through a variety of different commercial companies and collaborations or consortiums like Adopt OpenJDK. For me, like I said, Toretto looks like an interesting way forward. It's where I'm going to be focusing my attention in the next year as well. And yeah, you need to decide now. This is the, like I said, January 2019 is when things really do change for the for the Java community based on what Oracle has decided to do with their licensing. And before, we've kind of been lulled into this false sense of security that, oh, new version, just grab it, throw it on there, run with it. It's a different world now. And there are a lot of options out there. And it really is worth your time, and now really is the time to sit down and look at what's out there, look at what's still going to be there 5 years from now. Because this isn't a decision you want to have to make over and over again. If somebody goes out of business, or somebody gets bought by Oracle, or somebody changes their license terms, you want to be thinking strategically. Because I've already spent a lot of time on this, and I could have been doing other stuff, and I'd really rather not have to come back and do it again 18 months from now. And that's it. So thank you for your time. One more reminder, I'm not a lawyer, and yes.
Can you talk a little more about Oracle's licensing regarding virtualization, or do you know much about it?
So there is a link. A legal firm actually did an analysis of it, and yeah, we'll put the slides up where you can get it. Honestly, I started looking at it, and the more I looked at it, the more confused I got. And I felt I was too confused by it to actually come here and talk meaningfully about it, but it hinges on the concept of availability. If your Java instance is available to X employees because you have a virtualized infrastructure, those count as end users. So even if you're not going to use the Java application, the fact that it's available to you because you have a virtualized infrastructure, you just go on your computer, you can connect to it, you are viewed as an end user. That's my briefest interpretation and understanding of what I've read. Like I said, there are treatments about this all over the web. You can hunt around and find it, and you can be just as confused as I am. Yes?
So does Amazon allow Toretto to be used in non-AWS systems?
Oh yes, absolutely. Yeah, you can download it. I've already downloaded it. You can run it on Windows, Mac OS. You can obviously run it on Amazon Web Services. And as I mentioned in Q1 of 2019, they'll have the other primary Linux distributions, Red Hat and Ubuntu, those as well. And that's obviously an important part of this. And I think part of the rationale is they want as broad a distribution as possible for Toretto to get it out there, get it beaten up and tested to make sure it really is ultimately the de facto version of Java. Because whoever's using a Java version the most is going to ring it out the most and make it the most reliable. And they have the infrastructure to do that with AWS. Yes? Either one.
Do you think there's no way Oracle will come up with some ingenious legal argument to sue Amazon?
I don't think they can because of the OpenJDK. And I think this is part of the reason what's going on now is so tortured in terms of what does this all mean? What does this license mean? How can I use it? How can I use it? Is at the end of the day, Oracle bought something that was open source. And so Red Hat aside, how do you make a ton of money on something that's been open sourced? And so the way you can do that is things like, okay, so what we'll do is we'll release OpenJDK every 6 months and not support it. We'll earmark a couple versions, 8 and 11, that we will say, look, we'll support these for 5, 10, however many years our customers want us to, if they pay us. And so that's one of the big distinctions between the free version and the not free version. And again, it comes down to what do you really need, either as individually or in a corporation, what are you doing with Java? What are the long-term implications of what you're doing with Java that you may or may not even care? Like I said, if you're just working with Java at home, playing around with it, yeah, you can use the Oracle stuff. They're not going to care. They're looking for corporate use. And what corporations want is long-term support. I mean, this is how Red Hat made their billions. Is corporations looked and said, yeah, Linux is nice, but I need someone to do all that work you've got to do with an operating system to make sure it's patched, available, and everything else. And they're willing to pay for it, and they're willing to pay a subscription for it as well. So Oracle is trying to mimic that model. But based, again, I'm not a lawyer, but based on everything I've seen, the OpenJDK is the OpenJDK. It's out there. The real question is who's going to build it, who's going to patch it, who's going to distribute it. And there are a number of different groups doing that. There is the Java, I think it's TCK, the Java compatibility. It's the thing you run your Java build against to confirm it conforms to the Java standard. There is a wrinkle there where technically Oracle could say, well, we're not going to let you use the TCK to validate your OpenJDK installation. But they haven't done that because Toretto is validated against the TCK. But again, never underestimate Larry Ellison. I'm sure he may think of something that none of us have thought of as another angle to get more money out of the Java asset that they bought from Sun. Question back there?
Does Amazon Toretto, what version of Java does it compare to have in these features, like the streams,
Right, so the Java 8 version is the Java 8 version that we know of.
okay, so it has the same version in
Yes, yep, because it's built on OpenJDK. So there's this huge convergence between the Oracle JDK and OpenJDK. And so, yeah, the whole point is with Java 11, theoretically they're supposed to be identical. But feature-wise, the version 8 from Toretto is what you would expect if you got from Oracle Java version 8 as well. So it has the streams and all that stuff.
And what about like the fixes for security updates? Are they going to have their own fixes?
Well, that's another interesting wrinkle in all this because there's at the top of the pyramid is the OpenJDK. And so Red Hat does this as well. So Red Hat will do a security patch, then they'll push it upstream to the OpenJDK. And so this is how the OpenJDK evolves, is you've got these, you will fix it first, and then push it up to the OpenJDK. But again, it takes time to get from here up to there. And we're back to that timing issue of if there's a critical security flaw, if you're a Red Hat customer, you're getting OpenJDK from Red Hat, you're happy, life is good. If you're not paying for support and you're just getting the OpenJDK when it comes out, it could be weeks, could be months, don't know. It's a matter of when it finally gets incorporated into the OpenJDK version. Other questions? Yes?
Do you think that this could, and of course this is your personal opinion, if this could help strengthen Oracle's Java presence as being the secure version of Java, or kill it? Like, do you think like it'll slowly kill Oracle's Java as you know?
I think it's an enormous chess game. I think with the advent of Amazon Toretto, I see Toretto as a real game changer because you have smaller companies like Azul that will commercially support your version of Java, but they're a small company. And who's to say they'll be here 2 years from now? Who's to say Oracle won't just buy them and say, hi, you're licensing from us now? Versus, nobody's going to buy Amazon. They're not going to go bankrupt. And so they've got the mass of an organization you would want to have behind your version of Java. I really see this as a seismic shift in terms of, so I work for an enterprise. We have to make financial decisions about, we're using this technology. How are we going to pay for it if we have to pay for it? Do we have to pay for it? It's not just a simple yes, no answer. It's like, if you pay for it, this is what you get. If you don't pay for it, this is what you don't get, or don't get when you want it necessarily. And you need to act like a business and make sound business decisions where we can't just say, I don't want to pay for anything and I'll just take what happens. That's an ongoing battle. Because when this first came to light with the proposal I'm working on, they said, can't we just switch to OpenJDK? And we could say yes, but this is a firm fixed price contract. We've never run this stuff on OpenJDK. And the easy answer would be, sure, let's do that. The responsible answer is, no way in hell. We take the time to understand what the implications are of changing the foundation of the application we're selling before we step in and say, okay, we're going to switch it.
Thank you.
So yeah, I think for me, when I saw the Toretto announcement, I was like, wow. Because for me, that's a potential game changer.
Sounds huge.
Yeah. But again, never ever underestimate Larry Ellison. Other questions? Yes.
You think this could put more jobs towards like Western countries in terms of like the costs instead of like offshoring the work into like say India or other countries that will do the work for cheap?
Say the first part again.
Well, just, so do you think that this the cost of using closed source the $25 per core system would make it so there are more jobs in Western world than there are in say like the East, where we would be offshoring more jobs to them, like say India?
I think in this day and age, there's always a free alternative. And I think in the old days, like when Paul and I worked together, you would take a job to get experience with the technology. Oracle databases are a great example. You take a crappy job just to get the experience, because that was the only way to get you couldn't buy Oracle yourself. You couldn't download Oracle off the internet. The only way to get valuable experience was to go work for a company that used those technologies. That's all changed. You can get experience with pretty much any technology today just by going to the internet, hunting around, finding it, downloading it, and working with it. And I think that was the big change that shifted where this work could happen.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
I'm glad everybody stayed awake. Anything else? All right, thanks everybody.